Welcome back to another episode of Successful, the podcast.
I'm one of your hosts, Blake, and joining me,
I'm one of your other hosts, Justin.
And this is the podcast all about the not-so-subtle truth about success and
the art of sucking less in pursuit of it. Let's not waste any more time and get right to the show.
This is totally off topic, but I found potentially a puppy that I might be getting, so I'm excited.
You're leading with a puppy? I can't top that. That's totally unfair. That is emotional gold right there, and I've got nothing to even compare with that. But congratulations. What kind of dog is it?
It's a weenie dog. I've been wanting a speckly one forever. They're called the dapple ones, so it's the one that have like different colored spots. Have you seen them before?
I don't know if I've ever seen a dachshund with, no. I've never seen it with multiple spots, like a Dalmatian, but with different colored spots?
Kind of, but instead of being like white with black spots, they're different colored and they're more like splotches than like circles.
And those are going to sound
it's almost
weird,
like a watercolor looking.
What's it called again?
They're called dapple. I'll send you a picture. We'll see if it pulls through though, because the last one was a scam, which goes along with our theme of some setbacks and things. But yeah, I've been wanting one for a while. My mom found this lady on Facebook, and then I think it was in her neighborhood or something, and she wanted like a deposit. And I was like, nope.
It's always a bad sign.
Yep. So we'll see if this one's real, but seems legit so far.
All right. Is it, when you say puppy, are we talking like weeks old kind of puppy, like a true puppy?
Yeah, a true puppy. I think she said 15 weeks. So old enough to have its first group of shots and things like that, but still a puppy.
I love the idea of a puppy, but having had 2 puppies in the not so distant past and having 3 kids, I'm kind of done with that potty training stage. I need a break. They're so cute. They're so amazing, but I want you to enjoy all that because I don't want to.
Yeah, it's like having a child, like a newborn baby. Yeah.
Well, and it's so weird because so many of the animals today have allergies. When I was growing up, it was like you gave a dog kibble or whatever. There's a million different foods you can give them now. They all have different reactions to things. So it's a very different time.
Oh, yeah. My cat has to be on like super special, expensive food because he has a urinary issue. That's, I guess, genetic. So he doesn't metabolize his food properly. So he has to be on this particular diet. So he drinks enough water so that he doesn't get like backed up, essentially, for lack of a better word.
Well, it's a clean terminology. Very nice. So I'll give you one before we dive into today's topic, which is perfect for how you kicked it off. So thank you. Is when I was growing up, one of my buddies, his mom, I don't know why, but they were getting rid of pets. So like my brother got a turtle named Myrtle, and I got a chameleon named Scooter. And Scooter, I mean, if you've ever had a chameleon, they look beautiful, but they're like mean as hell. And it was a veiled chameleon. So they're the ones with like
the cord. I didn't know that. They're mean.
They are really mean. They're too dinosaur-like. But anyway, so he was a boy, obviously, and his name was Scooter. Their penises come in a pouch underneath their belly. Okay. Well, apparently, and there's 2 of them in there. And so apparently a lot of the time,
what?
Twice the fun. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you here. But like they'll fuse together. If they're not out in the wild mating, they like fuse together. And I mean, what a horrible way to die. But I guess that's what happened. So you have to go like every 6 weeks or so to get, it's called an impacted penis. I swear to God, you can all look it up. But like my poor mom, I left for college and she had to take this chameleon every 6 weeks to get its penises separated. And the worst part is they don't numb them. They just like take this little like Q-tip thing and they open it and you swab it and there you can see them go like, like they're...
No. That is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. I didn't know they had 2. First off, second off, what a pet process to have to deal with.
It turned me off definitely to having chameleons or any sort of lizards for a while because a lot of reptiles do have issues. I didn't know this, but a lot of them have issues like that. And so dogs comparatively are much better. So your poor cat with the urinary issue, it's a lot better than that. Impacted penis. Yes. So with that, since we're talking impacted penises, let's talk about setbacks.
How should we kick this off? Do you want to start with one story or you want me to start with a story that kind of dives into the idea of setbacks, our experiences with it, and what we kind of learned from it?
Because you always summarize it so elegantly, I'll let you kick it off here. But I will put a preface in here to say that what spawned this conversation today was we're always looking for new topics and things to go through. And all of a sudden, we just started hashing back and forth. And we all were like, this is something very relatable, something that I think we all need right now with setbacks. And so I'm excited to hear your stories. I know rough outlines because we talked about that, but I don't know the details. So let's dive in.
Awesome. Well, the first one that I thought about was So I had told some stories about how I'd worked at some bigger studios when I moved to LA, and how the one studio was the director didn't recognize his assistant. So this was that job. Okay. And so I went in as an office assistant and slash office manager. And I was there for 2 weeks. And that was also the same job that the executive producer pulls me in and says, "Oh yeah, you've been here for 2 weeks. You know what's going on, right?" And I had no idea what was going on. Neither did anybody else. But in that whole process, I became close to a lot of the people in the office. The bottom part of the studio was where everybody in the movie side of things was. And then if you went upstairs, that was where all the television stuff was. So it was cool because that's unusual for a lot of studios to have the television and movie people in the same space, or anywhere close to each other where you're interacting with both. That was one of the things that was cool about that. That's not typical. But I was essentially managing both sides. And then we had also there was another manager. I don't remember what his title was exactly, but he and I got along really well, but he had no idea because he mainly dealt with the things upstairs, what the manager downstairs did. So nobody really knew what my job was the entire time. But despite that, because I had created such a good relationship with everybody in the office, including that other manager, and because I knew the one executive assistant to the executive producer who got me the job in the first place, I really thought I was going to get this job. 100% thought I nailed it. Everything was going great. And he pulls me into the office. We have that meeting, whatever. And then as we go along, I start to realize that everything's sort of chaotic. They're in the middle of moving from one office to another. So I guess they were only in this particular office because they were in the process of building their actual office.
Okay.
Which was actually really cool because it was created by the studio lot people who create the stuff at the theme parks and things.
Okay,
so
that's awesome.
I did get to see that. That was cool. They actually had this hidden bookshelf that opened up to the executive producer's office. So you pulled a book and it slid. It was really crazy the way that they designed it. But anyhow, as we're going along, I'm sort of floundering because I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I kind of found ways to be helpful. Yeah. And the production designer was on the upstairs floor. So oftentimes I went up and I helped him do research and helped him and his assistant. He was super nice. And they all put in good words for me. But one day I go in and, my friend who got me the job pulls me aside and he's like, "Hey, he's going to pull you in, but I just want to give you a heads up because I feel like you should know going in what you're getting yourself into. You didn't get the job, kid." And I'm like I remember I kind of was surprised. Not to be that person, but usually it's the whole "oh yeah, who blah, blah, blah." I really thought things were going well. I came to find out years later that it was because I guess when they hired temporary people, there's this whole extra process they have to go through in order to hire you. So temp jobs are great in theory, but not great when you are working at studios and things like that, because in order to transition, they have to do all this additional paperwork and they have to do all these regulations. I think it's California laws or whatever. So that was one of the main reasons. But yeah, I didn't get the job and I was super devastated. One, because that was around the time I had just moved to LA. I did not have a steady job and I happened to get lucky and get that immediately. So I was yeah, it's happening. It's nope. Not happening. I think the biggest setback wasn't actually not getting the job. The biggest setback was I was so confident I was going to get the job that I stopped applying to jobs. That was a huge mistake on my part. And that taught me a very valuable lesson about not counting your chickens before they hatch. Not getting so confident, even if things seem like they're going great and you're doing all the right things, to, I guess, kind of do stuff like that, stop applying or stop "Oh, we got it. Let's go. Next step, done."
Because they didn't get to tell you, and I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm sorry that happened to you. I will tell you that lesson is very important because my story is later in life, but I had something similar when I was younger. And so I had the exact same, not the same situation, but I did what you did, where afterwards it was I applied and I applied and I applied and I applied and I networked until I got someone another job. I never rested on my laurels again after getting burned one time. So I think that's a really, really important lesson, and it's a sucky one to go through, but I think it's an important one. Here's my example. Years ago, probably 2018, 2019, somewhere in there, I was an advocate for this company and they were just starting out. I was in this business called RPA, which is robotic process automation. It was a really cool technology where basically you automate all these processes that are mundane. It was great for HR, it was great for legal, it was great for anything that's like repetitive in nature. I brought this company in and they'd been around for maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years and they're from Romania. I know we're going to bleep it out, but just for fun, I'm going to call them out. I was this huge advocate. In fact, weeks before, this was in December. So like I went to their big conference in December. I was one of their keynote speakers. Everything was going great. And so the owner one day said, you know what, we'd love to have you come work for us. I'm like, fantastic. Hell yeah, it'd be great. I'm your advocate. I know everything about this product. I've worked all sides of it. I can help sell it. I can help build it out for people. I love this. I'm totally in. So he's like, hey, look, we're opening up this brand new New York office. It's our first US based office. We're looking to have a big presence here. So I'm going to set you up with this guy and we're going to just bring you on board. So I'm like, sweet. How could this go wrong? How on earth could this not happen? So long story short, I make it all the way. And then they invite me out to New York. This is probably, I don't know, a month after this whole process started just to get schedules aligned. So I head out on a Wednesday and my interview's on Thursday and then I was going to fly back Friday. Get up on Thursday morning, have a great excited moment, get all ready, have a great breakfast. I show up there and it's already weird because they're building out the space. Half of it's built out. I remember there's like light fixtures where it's like that raw cement and then the fixture just hanging there. There's tarping everywhere. There's a bunch of people running back and forth, workmen, and yet there's work going on next door. So I was already like, what the heck is happening here? Walk in, I go in, and the receptionist is super sweet. She's like, he'll be right with you. Takes me back and he's like, okay, we got your day set up here. We're going to do basically, here's your 2 people you're going to walk around with. We're going to take you to lunch. We're going to have a great time. And really, I just want you to enjoy your time here. I'm like, all right, no questions, anything. Perfect. This is great. So I meet these guys. This kind of was an interview. It went really well. We went out to lunch. And then after we come back, the head of the location here pulls me aside and goes, look, you'd be a great fit for this. And I'm like, would be? Hang on, wait a second. I didn't know would be was on the table here. I thought I was a good fit. And he ended up saying, look, we're not going to be moving forward with this. I was just like Godsmacked. Like, what do you mean? I didn't know that was an option. It didn't occur to me. You meet with the CEO, you're coming on board. This guy brings you on. And what happened was that his brother-in-law was going to actually take the position. And so he's like, look, for HR purposes, we got to make sure we're doing all this stuff, but don't worry, we'll find you another position in the company. And I was like, that's not the way I operate. I ended up not pursuing anything else. I actually didn't really work with them anymore. I talked to the CEO still occasionally, but mostly it was just kind of a massive, like, I saw no red flags in this thing. And it ended up, you make it all this way, you're going out, you're having a great time, and it just evaporated overnight. It was crazy to me.
So let me get this straight. You went through all these rounds of interviews. You knew these people. They flew you out to New York and put you up in hotels and everything. And they waited until then to tell you that they were going to hire internally?
Oh, yeah. And then the worst part was it was almost stuff we've talked about offline a little bit where I went all day. I started at, I think, 10 and I left at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So it wasn't like this started my day. This was at the end when I was expecting an offer letter. So,
man.
And the worst part was I had to spend the night in New York because I didn't have a flight till I think 8 or 9 the next day. So I had this awful feeling. I went back to the hotel. I actually dinner with some friends, which was nice, but it was a surreal moment, a big growth opportunity.
So did they end up compensating you for anything, or it was just they put you up in the hotel and that was that?
That's the worst part. Up until this point in time, they basically gave me a per diem. They would say, you could spend this much and it's on us. I went to the hotel. It's all on them. I'd go out to dinner. They had like a relationship with the maitre d' or whatever, and I would get it all taken care of. Well, after that, literally shut off. So the last night I had to pay for my hotel. I had to pay for all my meals, but I did get them eventually taken care of. But again, I was expecting to pay that. It wasn't like, it was like kind of an unexpected expense. So it sucked. It probably took 4 weeks to get. I mean, it took forever to get. It was insane. So
that's terrible.
It sucked. And again, like you, though, it was one of those things where there was no reason to doubt that I was not going to get it. They never said there was any other competition. Nothing. I was literally the sole guy this whole time. And then to be totally taken out like that, it was, I don't like to use the word devastating, but it was definitely, it sucked.
Well, I will tell you, as an extension of sort of the story that's kind of interesting is, so they ended up hiring somebody else who had a master's degree for that particular position. But because they were like all over the place and whatever, they ended up calling me back in to to go work for them on temp again for a couple of weeks, which at the time I was like, well, crap, I need the money, because I think I hadn't found, I either had just found a job or I hadn't found one yet. It was somewhat overlapping during that time.
Okay.
So I went in, but the thing about that was the person who had been hired, she didn't understand why I was being brought back. So then she thought that her job was in jeopardy. And so that was awkward and uncomfortable, because I had to pull aside my friend and be like, hey, do you realize this is going on here? Because she's acting all weird with me. And does she think something else? And he was like,
she's threatened.
oh. Yeah, he was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't deal with that. It's not it was his boss. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to talk to her. And he goes, okay, just be careful with that. And so I pulled her aside and I said, hey, look, like, I know that that I came in and I had applied for this job, but you got the position. You already got there. I said, so you have me while I'm here. Just take advantage of that. I don't know. I guess that conversation kind of flipped the switch for her. And after that, we were friends, whatever. I mean, we didn't like hang out after work and stuff, but I mean, we got along and it was fine. But that was interesting too, because it put me in a position I had never had to deal with. And they were not on the management level going to deal with that. And so it was like, okay, well, either I'm going to deal with this awkward, uncomfortable elephant in the room the whole time I'm here for 2 weeks, or I'm just going to go talk to her and be like, listen. So I chose the second option and it ended up working out in my favor. So that was an interesting part as well. I will tell you that one thing that did help, though, is that my friend who got me the job in the first place did pull me aside and say, hey, I'm sorry this happened and it didn't work out. Honestly, this is a hard first job because you kind of just getting thrown in the mix. You've never had to roll calls. And like, this is one of those studios where like the rolling calls are, you have 50 billion buttons on a 100-year-old phone. You press the wrong thing and you send everybody like disconnects or everyone to the wrong office. And they're all these important people. It was kind of rough because nobody knew how to use the phone either. So they couldn't even teach me how to roll the calls properly half the time. I mean, it was
awesome.
Kind of astonishing for such a high level studio, but it was a little bit of a shit show the entire time. I mean, it was a great experience for me, especially back then, but like it was not what I expected, to say the least.
No, I mean, it sounds absolutely horrible. And I think what you did was incredibly mature, because a lot of people would not have done that. First of all, they wouldn't have gone back and they wouldn't have been like, look, this is awkward. But I'm still going to help you. Most people would be like, you know what, I'm just going to get paid and sit in the corner over here. They're not going to be proactive like that. So I think it's a real testament to your character. And it also says that that's the appropriate response. That's what you should do, even when you get a setback like that and it sucks. Because again, we're telling you these stories as lessons, but also you guys everyone's going to relate to these in some facet of it. And I think it's so important to keep in mind that when it sucks, it's how you react, that follow-up phase, that's so important. Do you get bitter? Do you get mad? Do you let it get you down? Sometimes. But how do you bounce back? One of the things we talked about prior to this was we don't want to be that superficial, like it always works out, it's great. Because it didn't, right? It turned out good eventually, but it takes a while, right? And I mean, obviously, I'm still bitter about this, and this happened at least 5 years ago. It sucks. I think being honest with this and being open to it is so important as part of the process, because I don't know how else you deal with it.
I mean, it really is. You have to acknowledge it and you have to work through it. There really is no other way around it, because it's going to cause issues if you shove it down, or you shove it down and then you come to realize in something else, you end up self-sabotaging by accident, because all of that's under the surface and you're making assumptions or whatever about situations that are similar but not the same.
Absolutely. Let's keep this thread. And I'm going to this was not planned today, but it happened literally right after we got off our call today.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
And this is I call these the shittiest of shitty setbacks. So.
Oh no. Okay.
Because it was so unexpected. So I own a shirt company. We filed our taxes and all of our stuff goes to one of our partners in Illinois. So he sends this really cryptic email and he said, "This effing sucks" in the title. And I'm like, oh God, this can't be good. So I open it and there's nothing more intimidating than getting a letter from the IRS saying that you owe $10,800. Like that's just... So let me tell you the story here and how this all plays out. And so first of all, it's a great example of just a totally caught off guard moment. This was unexpected and it takes up so much of your day. So I had to cancel most of my day today to deal with this issue. Here's what happens. This is part of what makes our system bad, because we tell people you're innocent until proven guilty, but that's not the case with the government. Like, we have to prove that we're innocent. And so here's the scenario. So basically what they did was there's 4 partners in this company. The best part is it's from 2021. Okay. So we just received it in May 2023, this issue. This is how insane this is. So they basically said that we didn't file K1s, and K1s are basically, so like if you are part of a company and you're a partner, you get a thing called a K1, which means here's your distribution for the year. This is either how much you made or lost in the company this year. It's a very standard form, very easy, and you have to file it. It's not something you don't. We did file it. And basically what they did was they charged us $10 a month for a year per person. So it came out to $10,800 is the gist of it. And so rather than saying it's our mistake, let's see how we can work this out together, we now had to go through all of our records and show that, yes, here's the proof that we sent it to you. Here's the email you sent us back in September of 2022 saying, hey, we have received everything. You're good to go. Here's your K1 filings, all that. And yet we have to waste all of our entire, what is it now? 2:00 our time. I've been working on this for like 4 hours today for something that obviously we didn't misfile because I have my taxes, which showed that I filed the K1 through that. All the partners do. It was just insane. And so I bring this story up because the way we do things is wrong. First of all, instead of saying, hey, we found a discrepancy, let's talk about this. You can try to call us, but you can't get through. You are now responsible for finding evidence that you didn't mess up, even though it was probably us. Because the other thing that people probably don't know is when you send stuff to the IRS now, you're not supposed to staple it anymore. And I don't know, I use an accountant, so I didn't know this. So imagine you file, especially business taxes. There's a ton of forms. I'm sure it got lost somewhere or they got stuck together or whatever, and no one paid attention. And since they're so short-staffed, they're just like, here, we're going to take your $10,000 and hopefully you don't fight this. Again, another setback that was a waste of time. And my lesson learned here is, okay, next time we're going to take pictures of us putting in the mail. We're going to do a video of us putting in the mail. We're going to do all these things. And it's stupid we have to do that because again, we didn't do anything wrong. We still have to fight this. And the best part is, so we have 10 days to dispute this. They have 12 weeks to acknowledge they received it.
What?
That's my point. This is how insane it is. So we have 10 days to reply. And the best part about the letter is it's dated the 15th of May. They received it the 15th of May. There's just so many things wrong with this. I could go on forever. But my point of this is that we were proactive. We didn't say, woe is me. We found the proof. We worked as a team and we got through this. Am I bitter? Yeah. Did it waste my time today? Absolutely. Is it stupid? 100%. Does it make for great podcasting? Yes.
That's kind of like, I had something similar happen. I didn't know this, but when you would know this because you lived there for so long, but California has state taxes and it has county taxes.
Yes.
I didn't know about the county taxes.
Yeah.
So I get this scary letter. This was probably like my second or third year there from 2 years prior. Oh, we're going to press charges, blah, blah, blah. If you don't pay your tax, like all this stuff. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? I'm freaking out. I'm looking things online and people are like, oh yeah, California will come after you. And then it's suddenly you owe 10 grand and all this stuff. And I'm like, 10 grand? Like what? I'm freaking out, right? I get there. The lady like does the stuff or whatever. And she goes, oh yeah, you owe $30. All of that for thankfully it was $30, but all of that for $30. Like you could have been like, hey, you owe $30. Like I had to get a scary letter and hyperventilate and then
and you took years off your life and they don't give that back to you at all. No. And for $30, are you like serious? California, that's not going to save you. All right.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry, Blake. But again, you were proactive. You took action. You did what you were supposed to do. It's a funny story now. At the time, like you said, it took years off your life. You probably had a minor heart attack. You didn't sleep well.
Freaking out. I was like, oh my God.
And that's the thing. I guess part of it is in other countries, like if I lived in North Korea, I'd be terrified, right? Because there's no retribution here, right? But in the United States, we have due process. We have all these things, except when it comes to taxes. There's nothing that you can do about there's nothing. Like you are guilty. You have to prove your innocence, even if you've done everything right. And that to me is just insane. That is just insane, especially when you're a law-abiding citizen. I get it if you're a scofflaw and you're like, hey, if you're a criminal, go after those guys. But a small business that's paying its taxes, that has for years and files everything on time, no issues. That's insane. You, a great Samaritan, you're paying your taxes, you're getting jobs, you're doing all these things, you're being a productive citizen, and they come after you. Like that to me is wrong.
I think it would have just been helpful because there was no point in time when I filed my taxes that any of that ever got brought up. Like nobody was like, oh, by the way, you've county taxes here. Like there was nothing. I didn't know about it until 2 years after I had lived there. Isn't that crazy?
It's incredibly insane. Yes. So
there should have been some notice or something. I mean, you go to the DMV, it's like $600 to switch your your stuff over to California. There should have been some other like, hey, by the way, we have county taxes too here. That's a thing.
Just as a friendly reminder, listen, we're here to help you pay them. So go to this website. No, it's usually some obscure thing. You have to dig through all this stuff. I'm sure you had to do tons of research, and it was hard to find.
Yeah. And then I had to go find the office, which that was like a whole thing in itself, trying to figure out where to go. I got sent to the wrong place and I waited like an hour, and then they sent me somewhere else. And then they were like, one of them, they were like, I'm not even sure you're in the right place because your county taxes depend on where you work and where you live. And then somebody else was like, no, it only depends on where you live. But that was a whole process. Like they didn't even know at their own tax office, like what the deal was. So stupid.
It's insane. So Blake, I think we should definitely have an episode dedicated to the insanity of government and how they're not helpful. But until we get to that episode, let's change gears. Let's go back. Tell us one of your other stories of a setback that you've had and what you did to kind of get through it.
So one that I guess is more of a long-term setback. We all have to try to be positive and we're like, oh yeah, we're gonna bust through this, But sometimes these things do take time. When I moved back from California, I didn't want to move back. Like I've said that in other podcasts. That wasn't my plan. Because of everything that was going on, I had to move back. There wasn't really a choice, especially with the way my brother's health was going. I saw that as a major setback because I was very much of the mentality of like, I have to be in LA in order to do this. I'm not in the Mecca anymore. I felt like I was going to become obsolete or like lose track of what was going on. I had a management company at the time that made it very hard because I wasn't in LA anymore. Trying to manage my clients, I eventually had to close the company because I couldn't keep up with what was going on over there because I wasn't there. So it was this whole process of adjusting. Plus, when I first moved here, it wasn't exactly planned. So I had to go completely out of any of the industries that I do. And I had to serve at the beginning just to have money coming in. So that was a whole thing. But I'm now in the process of planning everything to get back to LA finally, but this is now like 4 years later. And every year I was like, okay, we're going to do it this year. And then it didn't work out. And I was like, we're going to do it this year. And then it didn't work out. Now it's finally working out, but it's like, you have to have that resilience and keep pushing through. Sometimes it takes time, especially with something like that, where you're having to move across the country. One, it's not cheap to do that. Two, there's a whole bunch of logistics of figuring out cars, figuring out animals, figuring out furniture. What are you keeping? What are you not keeping? Looking at apartments. Apartment searching in LA is totally different from anywhere else I've ever lived because half of the places don't have offices and stuff. It's changed a little bit since I lived there. But when I first moved there, I mean, you go drive around and hope you find someone that has a phone number on the side of a building that happens to be correct. And then you have to worry about getting scammed. It's a whole different process. That was a major setback, but what was interesting about that is it opened my eyes to a lot of things because the one really good thing about moving back in terms of like my business stuff was that it gave me a chance to be really creative again. Because what happened is when I was in LA, I was so focused on hustling and everything all the time that I fell into producing a lot, which is not really what I want to do. I'm good at it, but I don't really want to do executive producing. I'm not really a numbers person. That's not really my forte. So when I came back here, I started writing again. I started doing those things. And that's actually when I got a lot of the awards and all that stuff that I didn't have time to try to pursue while I was there. I was working for all these big companies and things and had these major clients, but like, I didn't submit anything to festivals while I was there. I didn't have time. I didn't have the money. It was a whole different sort of ballgame. Now it's interesting because I've realized that I don't have to be in Los Angeles necessarily to be successful, even in what I'm doing. Because despite being here, I know more people in the industry now than I did back then because of all the festivals I went to and because of the way I went about things. Sometimes I think that detour ends up taking you on a path where you learn more. And I know a lot more about like the back end things that I didn't know back then that are going to be helpful when I move forward with my own stuff. Because I never wanted to, honestly, like be the studio person that works their way up. I always wanted to be like Issa Rae, somebody who's a pioneer who starts their own stuff and then does it their own way. Because that's the only way things have ever worked for me is when I do things my own way. But it took years to get back on track in terms of like getting back to LA, which was a big goal for me. Not so much the other stuff, but that part of it. And I think that's the part that gets lost a little bit. Sometimes it does. Sometimes these setbacks are massive and it takes you a long time to get back to where you want to be.
It's interesting. And you brought up a point there that I want to dive into a little bit because I think it's overlooked and I want to make sure we address it. And that is, you talked about the lessons you can learn from this, how it may have turned into something positive because of the things that happened. But I think part of the reason it was successful is that you surrendered to the fact, you didn't fight it. I think that's a huge piece of this here because a lot of the times we'll bitch, we'll moan, we'll complain, we'll fight these things so much that it takes us even longer to reap benefits from it rather than accepting it, finding a new way and pushing through, because the whole creativity piece of this and like the weird stuff that came along with it only materializes because you had the opportunity to do that. And I know it sounds ethereal. I'm sure people out there going, damn hippie, but let me tell you why. So it's important here because I think this is a piece that it's taken me a long time to learn because I was hustling since I was 14. We've talked about that before. And what I've realized over time is that when these setbacks happen and these suck factors and these shit storms and whatever we want to call them happen, the more we take time to acknowledge them, to look at it from all sides and to be open to the change that's coming as opposed to fighting it, the more I find opportunities present themselves and the more things happen. And I think part of the reason that does is because you get creative because you have to, and because you're open to it, because you're less consumed by all this stuff anymore. You've accepted it. And now you're realizing, okay, I need to do something about it. And that's where all of it kind of comes together. And so if any of you are going through this right now, or you've been through this and you're trying to figure out why am I not finding that next level, it's most likely because of this stuff, because you're still fighting it, because you're bitter about it, because you're whatever, and you're not moving beyond it, and you're not using that as a catapult to put you somewhere else. And I think that your example there is so powerful of, yeah, it sucked at first, right? It was a setback. It wasn't part of your plan. And the reason you came back was already a sad reason. And you had all those other things going on. But now, for whatever reason, it seems to be a good time. And now you're starting to plan to go back there. And that's really powerful. And I think that's it's an important piece that I think a lot of people overlook because they want the change to happen quick. They want it to happen yesterday and they want it to be easy. And it's
that instant gratification.
Yeah. They want their latte.
But the truth is that true success, I mean, especially if you're really trying to get like high up there, is not an overnight thing at all. I mean, it's very rare. And usually even when that overnight success supposedly happens, it's because it's the result of a whole bunch of other circumstances and a whole bunch of other efforts and works, which we've talked about before. But I think part of the issue is that people don't realize how much energy you expend when you are being negative about everything and fighting everything versus learning to adapt and looking for a new way. When you are doing that, you're putting yourself in a completely different mindset and situation. And I talk about this a lot because it kind of gets into self-care, is that people think self-care is bubble baths and champagne. And sometimes it can be, but most of the time it's you sitting there with all the feelings and all the thoughts that you're not wanting to acknowledge and sitting in that, working through it without drowning in it. And that is a skill that requires a lot of attention and time to kind of perfect, because oftentimes it's very easy when we acknowledge these things to allow them to just completely take over everything. It makes you want to give up. It makes you tired. You lose momentum. You can't think straight. You can't think of new ideas. You're frustrated. But if you can work through that and say, okay, I'm frustrated, I'm this and that, whatever. Now what? What can I do in my current circumstance to go where I want to be? That is where the baby step sort of happens. I don't think I said step. Baby step. There we go. Enunciation.
Hey, we're almost an hour into this podcast. You're allowed to have a little bit of a slur. It's okay.
I guess I had Bailey's in my coffee this afternoon.
I thought it was just me. All right. High five. No, we are not drinking on the show, but continue.
No.
Sorry.
Well, that was kind of it for me. I mean, I was just saying, like, I think it's important to adapt. It's important to do that self-care and take that time. People think they don't have time for that. But like, if you can't make time for yourself to do that, how are you supposed to make time for the things that are important in your life in other ways? How are you going to keep that balance? It all starts with you. If you can't balance yourself, it doesn't matter how successful you get, everything's going to be out of balance. You're always going to be unhappy. So I think that's an important thing to kind of touch on.
100%. And there's a great quote that I reference a lot by a guy named Viktor Frankl, who's a Holocaust survivor and a world-renowned psychiatrist. And he says, this is a really powerful one for me. I think it ties in very exactly what you're saying there. He says, between stimulus and response, there is space. And in that space is free will. And the idea is something happens. A lot of us react immediately. But if you take a second and you pause and then you react, it's a choice. A reaction is a choice, but it tends to be an unfulfilled choice. It's an immediate reaction. And if you pause and you contemplate and you go through the ickiness and you do all that, you come out much better. And that's the hard part, right? That's the hard piece of this. And so I'll tell you one more story here, because this one is a personal one that I'm not over. I'm going to be completely honest with you here. It happened probably 2 decades ago. So that, I mean, this is not a fresh wound, people. All right. This is something that still hurts. So I'll make it relatively fast. But basically, when I was 21, something like that, I was getting ready to graduate college, 21, sorry. I worked at a place because I figured my whole thing in college was it's about getting somewhere. So if you're going to serve, you serve because you like food. That was always my thing. It was about doing it for a purpose. And so I love to travel. And I was like, well, hell, there's a travel agency here on campus. I'm going to work at the travel agency because I want to travel and I'm going to get a huge discount. And I can make money, help other people, and travel. So as part of my graduation gift, I took my brother and I to Fiji. But the point of it was that it was my parents' anniversary. It was a special anniversary. I can't remember what it was, but let's say it was like a 20-year anniversary or a 25th anniversary or something. And so I was like, look, I'm going to plan a trip for them for Europe. And they're going to go for 10 days and they're going to go all over, just them. And I'm going to pay for it. And you got to remember, I'm a college kid here, not making a lot of money yet. I used all my discounts, everything else. And I called my dad's assistant. I cleared the time for him. So I knew that there was no constraint in doing this. So I gave it to him at Christmas. That was my Christmas gift to them. And their reaction was, what is this? And I'm built up in my mind like I am the freaking golden son here, totally selfless. I'm playing it forward. I am giving back. And my dad's like immediately, well, we can't go on this. And I go, yeah, I have cleared everything. You have no patience those week and a half. You are cleared to go. And he goes, well, I can't do this. And so this wonderful gift that I gave them ended up falling to the wayside and no one ever went on it. I wasted all this money and no one ever did anything with it. And instead it became like a burden to them to keep like, well, we can't go. And so finally I just stopped asking. I was like, just you do whatever you want to do. I spent it. You guys do whatever. And they never took me up on it again or did anything with it. And so the lesson I could have taken from that was, well, stop giving. No one ever gives back. They're never going to be grateful. But that's a crappy way of looking at it. So I didn't change the way I give, just realize that I need to change my expectation of the gift and just give because I want to. And so it's taken a lot of pressure off of that going forward, but it still hurts, especially back then, because it was a ton of money to me. It was so much money. It was thousands of dollars to me. I felt so proud because I'd booked everything. I mean, their transportation, their train rides, their every city, their hotels, everything was booked, all the excursions, everything they were going to do. And I took all this time to do it. It's still to this day painful just from the fact it feels like a rejection. It feels like you're rejected in some way. And I think that's part of what, when you go through these experiences, what hurts the most is not that you didn't get the job. It's not that you did something. It's that you feel rejected or that you failed in some way. And those two feelings are, please, psychiatrist, reply down here and say that I'm right. It's the equivalent of like having a death in the family. It's that powerfully seated in your psyche where all those emotions that go through you are so powerful. And we just kind of rush them off because we want to go to the next thing. And I think staying with it and getting over it. And if you don't get over it, like I'm not over this, but it didn't change who I am. In fact, it made me probably more giving because I'm like, look, I don't expect anything in return now. I don't want a reaction. I'm just going to give. And if you choose to take it, great. If not, I know that I put something good out there. That's kind of where my head's at now. And that was a hard, very uncomfortable lesson to learn. And it was a very icky lesson, especially as it's your parents. But it was a necessary one because now I give freely.
Wow. Yeah, that is a hard lesson to learn. And that sounds like it would have been an awesome trip. But I don't know. I can understand why that would still be frustrating and stuff for you and emotional, especially when it ties into family or friends. And I think that's one danger of working in the entertainment industry. You end up working with a lot of your friends, but that also means that any disagreements or arguments or anything that happens is going to happen with your friends. And so like I have a good example of that because I was completely sideswiped by this, despite what was going on. So I was working on a YouTube channel. I had become very good friends with the person I was working with. We were working late one night. I was working overtime. We did a shoot. It went great. Pulls me aside, goes, so I've been trying to figure out how to tell this to you. I don't know how to tell you, but the channel's been demonetized and we can't like continue anymore. And I was just like
devastating.
Yeah. And I was just, I was so devastated because I really loved that job and I learned a lot from that job. I had become pretty good friends with that person. And so I think that's part of why it was hard for them to tell me, was because we were on such good terms. And they also had never had to let anyone go, I think, before either. So it was a learning process on both ends. But it also made me realize that when things like that are happening in the industry, you kind of have to have your eyes a little bit more open to the different things that can happen and have a little bit of a backup plan for things and be in communication. And that was one of the things that taught me that when I ever have employees, if that's something I choose to do for my company stuff, I hope that I never sideswipe someone like that on such a big scale, because it really threw me off. And it was just like everything was just over. They didn't even know what they were going to do because literally everything just stopped. And so it was their entire livelihood.
That's a scary and a tough one. And again, it sounds like you handled it really well. But I think those lessons, though, are the kinds that help make you a better person, too, at the end of the day. You get more empathy with that, because that would be a horrible situation to be in. And I mean, I guarantee you there's going to be tons of people that are watching this going, oh, yeah, you think that's bad. Let me tell you, everyone's been there. And I think that's part of what I think that we talk about with part of successful here is part of this is taking that suck out of work. And I think that's part of where we're kind of lost in a lot of ways, is that we treat business as the center and people as the peripheral. What we miss is that there is no business without people. Even with AI and everything else, there's no business without people, period. If there's no consumers, there's no business. If there's no people, you can't have a business, period. So we've gotten this weird ass backwards thing since the 1980s where stocks come first. You got to look out for the company. And people are just expendable. And I think that if we learn anything from all these different things, whether it's working with family, whether it's working with friends, whether it's in the entertainment industry, or you're in a Fortune 25 company, or you are working as an entrepreneur, putting people back at the center of it is the trick. That's the secret sauce that no one seems to realize here. It's not saving 20% so you can make more. It's investing in your people so that you can take 50% more. Looking at it very differently here. And I think that as we transition here away from baby boomers, because they were the people that really believe this crap. And I'm just going to tell you here, it's absolute crap. Business school is absolute crap with this stuff. I will tell you that economics is absolute bullshit, because they don't look at these factors. Because when they do look at these factors, you realize your human capital is the number one contributor to wealth. That is the wealth factor. It's not your improvements in time. It's not your improvements in your speed and efficiency. Your productivity comes from your employees, and productivity comes from people that are engaged, that are willing to be there, want to be there, and are participating openly and willingly. That's where creativity happens. I think that we need to focus on the humanity of these whole things and realize that your story is such an important one there, that last one, because a lot of people that are invested in their job that closely and that tightly don't expect it to happen that way. It's understandable what happened. Does it suck? Absolutely. And it's a different situation, right? I mean, when things evaporate overnight, I don't know what you do. That's crazy, right? There's no easy answer. But I think also understanding, putting humanity to it, being there for each other in a different way is probably going to turn everything around and make it better. I know that was a long-winded answer, but that's kind of where my head's at.
I agree. And I think part of it is that, it was such a thing for so long to keep business and personal separated. And I understand certain aspects of that. But at the same time, you are who you are in business as you are in life, in my opinion. And so that being said, I mean, there's going to be more overlap. And honestly, as we move forward with this AI and working from home and all these changes that are happening, I think people are starting to realize that particular aspect of it, that it's not as separate as we think it is. And honestly, separating certain aspects is healthy and having boundaries is healthy, but completely trying to be a completely different person at work than you are at home is not really authentic and is not really going to work. And I think moving forward, companies need to be more, I don't know what the word is. I don't know that involved is the word I'm looking for, but they need to have more of an understanding of the fact that everybody has feelings. Everybody's a human being. Everybody goes through these different aspects. And work is such a huge part of life that I think there needs to be a little bit more importance on the human factor of it, like you're talking about, and having that understanding of treating things a little bit less business at times when it's appropriate for that particular situation.
And I think that that's the important piece here, because you need that piece of it, right? I mean, the more we communicate, the more we talk about these things, especially because we're all going through this massive change, right? We did a whole podcast on AI. And if you haven't checked it out yet, it's fantastic, is realizing that we are in a very tumultuous time, but it's also a really great time. I read an article the other day that pharmaceutical companies now are using AI to develop drugs that would take 20 years in months. That's awesome. I want more medicine that can help, right? I would love that. I keep reading about Lyme disease. I don't want Lyme disease. I want all this stuff gone. That's powerful. And so I think the more we are open to these changes in a positive way and trying to diminish the downside to it and talk about it openly and say, look, this is what's going on, whatever. I think it's just better all the way around. And we live in exciting times. We need to embrace the excitement and be less fearful.
I agree with that. And adapt along the way, as you like to say.
Absolutely. And as you like to say, live la vida loca.
I think you like to say that, but that's okay.
Oh, Blake, I may be projecting. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. That is absolutely true. But I got to say, thank you for another great episode.
Yeah, thank you too, Justin. This was an awesome episode. And hopefully it helps people who are dealing with rejection and dealing with all these things, how to get through it and get to the other side.
And more importantly, realize you're not alone in this, because everybody goes through an example like this. I mean, you heard between us, I think 6 different examples, and that's just 2 people. Everyone has something out there. And I've not had some of the things that Blake went through, but can I relate? Absolutely. And I know you can too. So thank you. And more importantly,
well, Justin, as they say, all good things must come to an end.
Alas, they must. However, this isn't the end, because next week, same time, same channel, we drop another episode.
So get excited, because we're going to be diving deeper into all the topics of the not so subtle truth about success and
the art of sucking less in the pursuit of it. So join the conversation below, and don't forget to subscribe.